This is the second video chronicling my attempts to learn how to do good acrylic pouring. This one is going to focus on what effect, if any, how paint is added to the dirty pour cups, what effect that has on the resulting image. But before I get to that, I want to touch on a couple of things I've learned since my first video. The first is that while I really like the Artist's Loft ready mixed pour paints, the containers are really difficult to work with. It's just hard to control where the pour is going to go. So I got some of these ketchup squeezers, and these run $1, $2 a piece. And I find I have much better control with these. The other thing is that these cups are hard to estimate equal amounts in because they're tapered. What 1 ounce looks like down here is a lot different than what it looks like towards the top of the fill. So what I did is I took one of the cups and I measured 1 ounce in each level, and you can see how the levels change for the same amount of liquid. Now what I do is I just slip this one in here, and because they're transparent, I can just fill it up to the levels I want, and that way I know, if that's the type of pour I want, that each one has the same amount of liquid. For the first test, I added the paint as slowly and evenly as possible to create flat, parallel layers. Let's see how it looks. Okay, no surprises there. Let's do a little tilting and see how it develops. Okay, not exactly what I'd call a work of art, but let's see how the next pour goes. For the second test, I'm going to force each color down into the previous color by holding the nozzle near the center of the cup and pressing straight out. What this should do is create columns of color in the cup. Okay, let's prep the board and see how it looks. And here we go. And if you're wondering how I'm prepping the boards, I'm using the technique that works best from the first video, which was a very thin brushed on layer of white. Here we go. See some of the other colors showing up much quicker this time. Looks like there's more mixing. Less definition in the lines. Let's tilt it out and see what happens. Okay, I'd rank this is much less interesting. The color seems to have mixed more together, and the pattern isn't nearly as good. So the center concentration pour doesn't look like it's a winner. For the third test, I'm going to be adding the paint slowly along the edge from which I'll be pouring. So we're going to get layers that are actually angled in the cup. The idea is that this might reduce the amount of pre-mixing before the paint gets on the canvas. And here we go. Okay, that's looking about the same as the first one with parallel flat layers. Definitely better than the middle one with the center pores. Let's do some tilting. But overall, what I'm seeing is that, with the exception of the center pores, there's not that much different. You might as well just make nice, neat little parallel layers and not fool around with anything fancier. Let's do a side by side and see if we can find out anything else. And here are the final results. I have to say, the very first one, the simplest one, where you just sort of dump the paint into the cups, actually came out the best. I thought this one was going to be, now that I see them side by side, I think that's the most interesting. Now, this isn't definitive because how the pores are tilted after they're poured has a big impact on what they end up looking like. Another thing I learned is that the last color poured into the cups, in this case blue, lots of times gets almost completely lost. And the reason is that it's the first one out, so as you're tilting it, it gets spread and the newer paint, the paint towards the bottom of the cup, actually rolls over and can cover it up a lot of times. Also, a lot of it gets flowed out over the edge. The other thing is that I'm not going to stress about how I add the color to the cups. I'm just going to try to pour it in flat, level layers, and that seems to work as good as anything. My next experiment is going to be linear pours, where instead of moving in circles, I move back and forth. And with that, I'll also be including inclined pours, where you're going back and forth, but the canvas is tilted so that you get a stripe down the middle. Until then, I hope you'll check out my main website, waynesthisthandthat.com. See you later.